What happens when a president sends combat-trained Marines into an American city that didn't even ask for them? Los Angeles has over 17,000 police officers, more than 24,000 National Guard troops, and a complete operational plan in place. Yet overnight, federal troops suddenly appear. No official request, no clear coordination. And now lawmakers are demanding answers. But instead of transparency, they're running into walls, deflections, and an even bigger question that no one in power seems eager to answer: who's paying for all of this, and what's being cut to make it happen? Because this isn't just about troop movements. This is about budgets, priorities, and the dangerous blurring of lines between national defense and domestic control.
Mr. Secretary, I plan to ask you some budget questions about the following: the cost of the Qatar plane, where the money from the Army's parade is coming from, or the National Guard deployments to the border, where that funding is coming from. I honor and celebrate the United States Army, but I'd like to know how much this parade is going to cost. I have sent the department letters on several occasions on this, and I'm still waiting for a response. But then something else happened this weekend, and it needs to be addressed. And that is the President's premature and escalatory decision to deploy not only the National Guard troops to Los Angeles, but active duty Marines as well. Mr. Secretary, we're both from Minnesota. I was in the Twin Cities during the riots that followed the murder of George Floyd. Tens of thousands of protesters took to the streets for days. Governor Walz made the decision to call up the Minnesota National Guard. At no point did we need the citizens of Minnesota request that the Marines be deployed. Our state and local law enforcement, along with our National Guard, who have worked on crowd control, they were more than enough. They were more than capable of handling this situation. History has proven that law enforcement and the National Guard are more than capable of handling situations more volatile than what happened this weekend. We all see the continuous loops on TV, but this looks nothing like the George Floyd protests or the Rodney King riots in Los Angeles in 1992. Mr. Secretary, this is a deeply unfair position to put our Marines in. Their service should be honored. It should not be exploited. The President has issued an executive order and talked about deploying troops across the country. Los Angeles County has 17,000 law enforcement personnel, and the state of California has 24,000 National Guard troops. So that's why the Los Angeles Chief of Police to say, and I quote, "The possible arrival of federal military forces in Los Angeles is absent a clear coordination, presents a significant logistical operational challenge for those of us who are charged with safeguarding the city," the end of his quote. As I mentioned before, in Minnesota, we train for those things together. So there's no need for the Marines to be deployed. So here are my budget questions, though. What is the current cost for what is taking place in California, and how is it going to affect this budget or the budget we're currently serving under? How much are these deployments going to cost for both the Marines and the National Guard? And what training or duties are not taking place because of these deployments? Where in your limited budget, sir, are you going to find, in the remainder of this fiscal year, are you going to pull the money to cover these deployments? What holes are being created?
Well, Congresswoman, thank you for the question. You are right. We are both originally from Minnesota, which is why I recall 2020 quite well, when Governor Walz abandoned a police precinct and allowed it to be burned to the ground, and also allowed 5 days of chaos to occur inside the streets of Minneapolis. The police precinct, ma'am, was abandoned and burned to the ground. And because of that, the National Guard was eventually far too late mobilized. And President Trump recognizes a situation like that, improperly handled by a governor, like it was by Governor Walz, if it gets out of control, is a bad situation for the citizens of any location. So in Los Angeles, we believe that ICE, which is a federal law enforcement agency, has the right to safely conduct operations in any state and any jurisdiction in the country, especially after 21 million illegals have crossed our border under the previous administration. ICE ought to be able to do its job, whether it's Minneapolis or
Chairman,
Los
I have
Angeles.
limited time. I asked a budget
And they are
question.
being-
Could the Secretary please address the budget? Thank you.
You asked about the situation in Los Angeles, and we believe
asked about
ICE
the budget.
agents should be
I
allowed to be
asked about the
safe in
budget,
doing
sir.
their operations, and we have deployed National Guard and the Marines to protect them in the execution of their duties, because we ought to be able to enforce immigration law in this country, unlike what Governor Walz did in 2020. There are 17,000 LAPD, you mentioned that. There would be 18,000 if not for the defund movement that folks like Gavin Newsom and Karen Bass have
Chairman,
implemented.
If
The police chief
if
said
Mr.
she was
Chairman, if
overwhelmed,
the Secretary's
so
not
we
going to
helped.
ask the budgetary questions, I will yield back my time if the Secretary refuses to answer the budgetary questions I put before him. They're important. What training missions aren't happening? Where are you pulling the money from? And how are you planning this in the moving forward? These are budget questions that affect this committee and the decisions we're going to be making in a couple of hours. If you're not going to answer them, please let the chairman know, and I will take back my time and I will yield it back to the chairman.
Mr. Secretary, I want to just let us know what accounts you're pulling the money to fund.
Thankfully, unlike the previous administration, we've got a 13% increase in our defense budget, and we will have the capability to cover down on contingencies,
Mr.
which is something the
Chairman,
National Guard and the Marine
back
plan
my
for.
time.
So we have the funding to cover down on contingencies, especially ones as important as maintaining law and order in a major American city. As far as training, all of the units on the ground have been fully trained in their capabilities of what they're executing on the
Chairman,
ground.
ask for budgetary. If he needs to get back to the committee with the numbers, I'd appreciate it, both current and present.
Happy to submit them for the record.
Gentlemen will receive an answer to the question.
Congresswoman Betty McCollum, who also happens to share roots with the secretary she was questioning, didn't waste time getting straight to the point. She's been asking for months about specific costs, how much the Qatar plane is running taxpayers, where the Army parade funds are coming from, and exactly what budget is footing the bill for National Guard deployments to the southern border. But now, something far more urgent has landed on her desk: the President's decision to deploy not just the National Guard but active-duty Marines into Los Angeles. And McCollum says this isn't just premature, it's escalatory. Her point is simple. In Minnesota, after the killing of George Floyd, tens of thousands of protesters took to the streets. The governor called in the National Guard. State and local law enforcement handled the situation. At no point did the people of Minnesota request Marines. The combination of local officers and the Guard was more than enough to maintain order. Los Angeles is no different. The resources are already there. So why send in Marines? Why override the decisions of local leadership? And more importantly, who authorized this? McCollum's warning is clear. This isn't just about one city or one weekend. It's part of a bigger troubling pattern: federal overreach disguised as law and order. She's not just asking why the deployment happened. She's asking where the funding comes from, who made the call, and what precedent is being set. Because when the federal government forces its way into local matters that are already under control, it's not about helping, it's about control. And that has serious constitutional implications. She's not the only one sounding the alarm. In fact, the Los Angeles police chief himself has gone on record warning that the sudden arrival of federal troops, without proper coordination, would be a logistical nightmare. Imagine having multiple chains of command in the same city, each with different rules, different priorities, and no shared plan. That's not law enforcement, that's confusion waiting to spiral into chaos. Local agencies have spent years building trust with their communities. They know the streets, they know the people, and they already coordinate with the National Guard when needed. Throwing federal troops into the mix risks disrupting that fragile balance. The problem isn't about more boots on the ground, it's about whether those boots are working in unison with the people already there, or stomping over them. History has shown that when uninvited federal forces step into local crises, tensions rise, miscommunication spreads, and mistakes happen. And mistakes in these situations can be deadly. That's why McCollum kept pressing the question no one seemed willing to answer: how much is this going to cost? What missions or training are being canceled because of it? Which line items in the budget are being drained to make it possible? She wasn't interested in political rhetoric or history lessons. She wanted hard numbers, and she wanted them now. But instead of getting answers, she got deflections. The secretary shifted the conversation to the unrest in Minneapolis in 2020, pointing fingers at the governor for letting a police precinct burn, and for delaying the National Guard deployment. That's a politically charged talking point, but it doesn't answer the question. This hearing wasn't about 2-year-old events in another state. It was about today, about Los Angeles, and about the financial and constitutional costs of sending Marines into an American city without a request from local leaders. The Secretary's justification: he claimed ICE agents, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, have the right to operate anywhere in the United States, and that deploying Marines and the National Guard was about protecting those agents as they carried out operations. That's an entirely different framing, one that shifts the conversation away from budget accountability and toward immigration enforcement politics. McCollum cut back in, reminding him that her question was about budget specifics, not ICE policy. She made it clear this committee has decisions to make in a matter of hours, and those decisions are tied to where the money is coming from and what's being sacrificed to fund these deployments: training, equipment, other readiness priorities. If those are being delayed or canceled, Congress needs to know. Only after being pressed again did the Secretary offer something resembling an answer. He pointed to a 13% increase in the defense budget under the current administration, and said that the National Guard and Marines are trained to handle these kinds of contingencies. In other words, the money's there, but that statement glosses over the real issue: whether this is the kind of contingency the military should be planning for in the first place. And while he promised to submit the actual cost figures for the record, that still leaves the public in the dark. And here's the bigger problem. When the defense budget jumps by double digits in a single year, most Americans expect that money to go toward countering foreign threats, improving readiness, and modernizing capabilities, not stationing combat troops in American cities. Yes, the military needs to be ready for emergencies. But what happens when emergencies become a catch-all excuse for bypassing local control and inserting federal forces into situations that aren't spiraling out of control? If we normalize this kind of domestic deployment, we're not just blurring the lines between military and police work, we're erasing them. Marines are trained for combat, not for community policing. Their presence on city streets changes the dynamic instantly. People react differently when they see troops in full gear, not just officers in uniform. It can intimidate, it can escalate, and it can fundamentally alter the relationship between citizens and their government. This is why budget questions matter so much. Because budgets are priorities in disguise. If we're spending millions to send troops into cities, that money isn't being spent somewhere else. Maybe it's coming from training exercises meant to prepare for overseas missions. Maybe it's coming from maintenance on essential equipment. Maybe it's coming from programs designed to help service members and their families. We don't know because those details weren't provided. And that's the heart of McCollum's frustration. The military has an obligation to be transparent about where taxpayer money goes, especially when that money funds actions that could reshape the balance of power between the federal government and the states. Without transparency, we're left to wonder whether these deployments are about safety or about politics. So here we are. A president sends Marines into Los Angeles. Local leaders say they don't need them. Lawmakers demand budget answers and get political spin instead. The Pentagon points to a bigger budget, but sidesteps the actual figures. And in the middle of all of it, we're left asking, is this the future? Are we moving toward a country where the sight of military patrols in our cities is no longer shocking, but expected? And if so, who decided that was okay? Because once you get used to something, it stops feeling extraordinary. And once it stops feeling extraordinary, it becomes the norm. The danger isn't just in what's happening today. It's in what today makes possible tomorrow. And that's why these questions can't just be brushed aside. So what do you think? Is this about protecting the public, or about projecting power? Is this the beginning of a safer America, or the slow creep of something far more dangerous? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and if you found this breakdown eye-opening, hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. The next story dives into an even more controversial move that's already sparking outrage across the country, and trust me, you'll want to see it.